Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. Now this video is going to be about descriptive geometry. I'm going to try and make it quick as possible. This is the history, a brief history of descriptive geometry that I've put up here, just to give you an idea of what it is. And the problem I have here, and you can please leave comments if you can help me understand this a little bit better. I don't understand the fact that the people that built Pumapunku understood descriptive geometry. Yet in our own history, as you can clearly read here, 1525 was the time when we kind of first had this on record. I think it was 1818 when the first books came out, but the first use of it written on paper, I suppose it would have been paperwork of the people that were doing the designs, goes back to the even earlier than that. Now this is a little bit more of Wikipedia telling you about the guy who actually designed it, and I think he put the first book out, if I'm correct. You can read all this for yourself. You can pause it. It gives you a good idea. It's not in any great details, but it gives you a rough idea of what this descriptive geometry is, how it was used, who invented it, when the first kind of books were written. This is from Wikipedia, and it just tells you a bit more about the guy. If I remember, he was he worked for the military designing fortresses. And that's when he first came up with descriptive geometry. So the problem I'm having here is that, okay, now when you look at Pumapunku, you can see that obviously they had amazing mathematicians. And the cuts on the blocks, which I will show you later in the video, the cuts on the blocks are so technical. The designs on the blocks are so incredible that they would have had to have somebody that understood descriptive geometry. So the paradox for me is, how do these people know about it? And why is it only on recorded history for us? Say if you took off a few hundred years and said, okay, in 1818 was the time when we first kind of had it in books. Descriptive geometry was written in books and it was recorded, but yet these people back then, you know, whoever built Pumapunku understood this. Now, also, if they understood this, and they clearly did, where's the blueprints? When they made Pumapunku, where are all the blueprints? Where is all the, you know, the kind of, something had to be written down. There's no way you could have just done this. And if it was on paper, then yeah, okay, I can understand that if it was just on paper, they wrote it down, but then they didn't have a written language. So that doesn't make sense. If you search descriptive geometry, see these pictures here that I've put up. This is what you would go back to, these early days, which is, I guess, even before the, 1818 was the guy that wrote the book and kind of was, known for descriptive geometry. I think he was a German guy, German or French. Sorry, my history's not too great, really. I shouldn't really. But yeah, there you go. Anyway, so that's any time you do search on this descriptive geometry, these are the kind of pictures you get up. There's nothing about Pumapunku. There's nothing about any of these sort of ancient races, these ancient cultures using descriptive geometry in their stonework. Yet it's there. But in our history, it was only sort of really not too far back in history when this was kind of a recognised thing. So there's your paradox for me. I don't. These people at Pumapunku understood this geometry. Today we would use a thing called CAD, computer assisted design. That's the modern way of doing it, because it takes the headache out of it. You don't have to worry about writing things down and having all the, I suppose they would have used, compasses and, all the technical gear you'd need to, a technical drawer would use. Yet they didn't have any of that back then. So again, this is where I'm caught between. I don't understand how these people, not only did they design Pumapunku, they understood the maths involved of descriptive geometry. There's no blueprints. There's no nothing. And okay, you could say the same thing with the Egyptians. Now, where's all their designs for the pyramids? That is another mystery. They must have written that down. There would have been a massive amount of planning involved to create this. And this is what boggles my mind. I don't understand the sheer amount of planning involved with something like this. You would need those plans written out. There's nothing there. Pumapunku doesn't have any of this, but yet clearly they understood the workings of descriptive geometry. Yet it wasn't till many, many, many years later we ourselves mastered this skill, and we put it in books and it was written down, and that's what's confusing me. So why would that happen? Why would it? Any time you try and search and look for the history of descriptive geometry, it wasn't that far back in time. And when I say it wasn't that far back, obviously we're talking a good few hundred years, but relatively speaking, in terms of how these people at Pumapunku, I mean, this is an example here. If you look at that cut, it's almost horizontal. It's not like a flat cut straight through the block. It's an angle. So the top part is angled at one way, and the bottom part is the opposite way. That's how they fitted these together. That is a classic example of descriptive geometry, as well as the design work with all the sort of like almost 3D images that they carved in. That takes descriptive geometry. That's the only way you could do it. So I'm blown away that these people understood this. And I'm not going to say that they weren't intelligent. Obviously they were super intelligent. But again, it doesn't kind of add up on the timeline. You mean to tell me that these people way back then understood all this, and then it wasn't till God knows how many years later that we ourselves managed to write this down and master it? That's, something doesn't add up there. Did they understand the meaning of what descriptive geometry was, and it was just normal to them? It was only us that managed to put a name to it and kind of say, well, this is what this particular form of maths, or that's what we call it. But back then they just knew it. They kind of just understood this, and it was. I don't see that, because you don't see that at many other sites. And these pictures here is a classic example again of how you get that design. You'd have to learn descriptive geometry to get that 3D image in a two-dimensional space. It just doesn't add up. The sheer amount of planning. I was talking to a guy called Wise Up. He does all the mud fossils, and he's an incredible guy. His theories and his ideas are just so refreshing to hear. I've just started to watch some of his videos. I've got through sort of like less than half of them so far, and they're just amazing. But again, we both agreed that the answer to all this, the answer to these sites, is in the planning. To understand the planning of how these things were created, and just look at this. I mean, come on. I mean, that's just not that's not ancient peoples, is it? That's not just a mind of somebody that's managed to kind of just sit there and say, okay, well, we'll cut a block this way and we'll cut a block that way, and then we'll see if these things join together. You can't do that with this amount of this amount of precision. This amount of design is just way beyond anything I've ever seen, and I keep saying this. I don't understand how, we ourselves, relatively not that long ago, a good few hundred years or so, we ourselves mastered this, but yet these guys had it nailed. They nailed it, and they didn't just get it right. They got it. They obviously it would have been them that actually designed it or came up with the formula of descriptive geometry. The people who made Pumapunku and probably other megalithic sites as well, all over South America. You got these examples, but particularly at Pumapunku, it's there in your face. So I'm kind of like, this is just confusing. It just doesn't add up. There's no real kind of. I don't see any other possible way that these people, they couldn't have just come up with these designs out of their heads, out of the top of their heads, and they would have been major planning to get to this point. Because it's not like, this is the thing with Pumapunku, you see. Now, it's not like you've got hundreds of blocks that are sat there that they made and said, oh, well, we didn't get that quite right, so we better throw that block away and start a new one. It's not like you've got, hundreds of examples of stones that they messed up because they didn't get it right. They got this right first time. Every block was cut with major precision. First go. Come on, when you look at some of the things, I'm a furniture maker and I've made drawers and tables and chairs, and the amount of times I've messed up making things by hand and had to go and remake a whole spindle or a whole panel again because I've messed up on something. And that's out of wood. These guys, they weren't messing about. I mean, look at that design for itself. CNC machine, that's the only way you could get that. And even then you still wouldn't get half as precise and half as smooth and that amount of precision from a CNC machine is pretty unheard of. You'd have to still go in and finish it by hand on some parts. Obviously, there's CNC machines that can make, high performance stuff like parts of engines and things like that. But